Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
All right, everyone. It is my distinct honor to get to introduce Kurt Schmidt of the Schmidt List podcast. And we're really lucky. Kurt has been doing just a small handful of these live sessions of his podcast, and he's graciously agreed to host one of them here today at Agile Day Twin Cities. So, Kurt, welcome to Agile Day Twin Cities.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. So today we're going to be recording a live podcast. I'm going to be talking with this fine group of folks. First, I want to do a couple of quick introductions. Directly to my left is Tammylynne. She's the CIO of Self-Esteem Brands. Then there's Kristi, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Securian. And then Meghan, she is the VP of Technology and Transformation Planning at Best Buy. And then Zubin is the CEO of C Prime. So welcome, everybody. So I want to start out, in today's world, the ranges are that 70 to 80% of employees are disengaged with work. It's not new information that people want more than just a paycheck. They want to know what impact they make on the work that they do. And we're always in a constant state of change. Every day, the change is accelerating. What kind of world would this be if 80% of people absolutely loved their jobs? It'd be a different place. But building a strong culture seems to start with the hiring process. It seems natural to me. So my first question is to Kristi. How do you know when you're hiring for a good culture fit for an organization? What practices have you seen work and what practices you've seen don't work?
Thanks, Kurt, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us. The first thing I always like to start with is that if we're hiring for culture fit, we're going to achieve more of what we had yesterday. And so when we think about hiring, and I do think it's one of the most important thing we do as leaders in an organization, and by leader I mean all of us who are part of an organization and part of that hiring process, is to be patient, take our time, be picky, and be picky about the right things. Focus on how the person that we're hiring or the candidates we're looking at would add value to the organization because of the differences that they bring to the organization. And so in my experience, focusing on a fit for values allows us to have a solid foundation that we begin from. And with the right curiosity and commitment to learn and grow and have a positive attitude, we can teach just about everything else.
That's great.
I'll comment on that. So I love the curiosity point that you raised, Kristi. Some of the interviews that I conduct and have conducted in the past is really just sometimes I want people to interview me. Like I share sort of here's the vision of what we're looking at and how that role may manifest in the company. And then I love when they ask me questions. So the curiosity thing especially, and the values, but the curiosity and them kind of teasing out what this could mean and almost where we can shaping it together if it's a good fit.
I think the comment that you made around, getting more of what you already have is important because it depends on the elements of your culture that you want to retain and the elements of your culture that you're looking to transform, right? So there's certain things, whether it's your core values, respect for people, appreciation for that, which is important. But then there's other notions of inclusivity and diversity, which may not be good enough where you're at. And so you need to be patient, and you cannot always predict who your end result will be, but you can require a diverse candidate pool. There's things like that. And what I love that patience comment, especially in an industry or at a vertical where you're evaluated on how long these positions are open, right? So if these positions go from like 60 days open to 160 days open, people are like, what are you doing? How are you helping this? And to, force the entire organization to be patient and to reinforce these values, I think takes a very strong leader to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think those are great answers, and I agree with wholeheartedly in terms of hiring for the future. I mean, I don't generally like the term culture fit. I think that actually creates a level of exclusionary, like, certain types of people have to fit into this mold. I think what's more important when we talk about driving motivation and driving that kind of engaged workforce is actually who you let go of. And I think, personally, I think companies are too soft to let go of people. They're overly conservative around, pushing out people that aren't stepping up or bringing an organization down. I would say that a negative person has an impact of 10 positive people, just like losing $100 is the same as winning $1,000. I think very much a negative person can really destroy morale and destroy a culture. So as you think about hiring, you also think about, are we being deliberate about letting go of people?
That's great. Yeah, the next topic I want to kind of touch on with that is, imagine we are sitting in front of a room full of people that bosses don't really understand their value and what they bring, and they're responsible for a team that doesn't report to them, but they are accountable for their output. Let's just imagine that we're there. What advice would you have, Tammylynne, on managing up and being able to, sort of promote yourself within your organization? How have you seen that done well and not so well?
The notion of managing up is a really important piece of your career, because it's crafting a consistent message throughout the organization, but every audience has a different perspective on what they're looking for, and understanding what's important to that level in the organization. Are they driven by sales? Is it top line growth? Is it risk mitigation? Like, what's important to them, and how can you frame your team's successes in a lens that would be meaningful to them, right? So if you take an organization that is entrepreneur-led, top-line sales, those are things that are important to them, it's hard for them to have an appreciation of security or infrastructure or foundational things that just really aren't sexy, right? So I think it's just a matter of, you have a consistent message of what your wins are for your team, but it's finding the right, appropriate lens for that group.
That's great.
I think one of the things we're working on getting better at, and I'm very interested in the responses of my fellow panelists, is how do you get the input that you need in order to make the decisions that are best for what you're trying to advance, and do it in a really speedy, appropriate, speedy way, and make sure you're not shortchanging some of those important stakeholders that maybe it's about managing up, or maybe it's just about managing more broadly than you did in the past because your role was more specific and you just had a responsibility to make sure your particular area of expertise was working correctly. And I think now in what we're trying to accomplish across organizations big and small, we do need to get broader inputs faster. And how do we do that in a successful way and not over-process at the same time?
That's tough. I mean, it's hard to do that expeditiously, especially depending on the size of the organization, to get that feedback loop going. I think it starts in pockets of the organization and takes hold. Just from my recent experience, having visibility to a lot more of those big activities to a broader swath of people. The level of detail may vary. The altitude of how much you go into absolutely will vary, but sharing, currently we have a comms team and where I work right now, and we try to do a very deliberate job of sharing some of those stories, and maybe the feedback loops will vary by what the work is, but ensuring people are sort of steeped in what's going on is important. And then, Tammylynne, I just want to add to your that managing up piece. I think there's a leader aspect to that too, of giving folks on the team the stage to actually do that, because not everyone knows how to do that, and so allowing them to present their material, present their initiative in the right way and in the right form with coaching is really, really important. Because managing up, like most of us as we grew up, at least me, I'm a list of 4, you don't brag, don't talk about yourself. And so you're ingrained in your head to not really share what you're doing, and you're the best advocate for yourself. So just wanted to touch on that too.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. First off, drive value. And I do believe if you work hard and drive value, it's obvious to people around you, and that always synthesizes up. I think as an organization, you have to be deliberate about soliciting, kind of value. It's something we struggled with recently as well, and we did something as simple as set up a Slack channel and say, look, hey, celebrate your team members, not yourself, your team members' success. So now you have other people celebrating someone else's success, and then you kind of start seeing that reciprocate. And, patterns emerge, but more importantly, you get into a culture of let's focus on positive discussions. It's very easy to go into negative. Once again, we, as humans, it's our nature to gossip, to whine, to complain, and trying to change that shift. And then just having empathy for, if you are managing up, understanding the context of your boss and where they come from, what's driving them, what's stressing them, and responding to that context, making their life easier. Going to someone who's super stressed out and bringing a problem to them, it's not helpful. Come with a solution, or just go solve it. And then just tell them you solved it after, or don't. They'll see it, they'll feel it.
One of the, I think, effective tools in measuring up to extend your comment, Meghan, is, if you're not comfortable sharing that story for your team, are there other people in the organization that are good storytellers on your behalf? So it's not you talking about your team, but is there, an end user, a business partner who was really impacted by what your team did, and can they tell that story for you? And so it's not braggy if you tell it, but it's, somebody else sharing that success.
Endorsements are so important.
Yeah,
Right on.
That's great. I wanted to jump off something you said, Zubin, about that negativity, because as humans, we tend to bond over negativity pretty quickly, and especially in our organizations. But what tactics have you seen to help break people out of that negative spin? Because I haven't met a business or talked to a business person where they're overstaffed.
No.
Right? Nobody's complaining about being overstaffed right now. Everybody's wearing multiple hats, right? And so that level of stress, how have you seen success in coaching people through that stress? Like what sorts of things have you seen?
Well, I would challenge originally and just say, sometimes less is more. Less people can actually get more work done. In terms of coaching through it, that's changing role, that's defining, being more clear on what you expect from them. Because of the world we have a lot of noise, and some people just can really struggle with that. So whether it's moving people into different roles, into a different mentor or manager, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes just letting them go is the right answer for them.
Yep.
And it's the right answer for the org. I've seen, and as a small company that's grown into kind of a larger company, I've seen how letting go of one person can dramatically shift. Literally, the next day, everyone's operating at a much higher level, and the cloud that was over the group for the last several months is gone, and it's amazing to watch that happen. And people step up and rise to the occasion. And I think that's also we underestimate the power of the team.
Yeah.
That even with one member falling out, the team keeps going, and they generally can do as much, if not more. Especially if that member has been struggling and bringing the team down.
Yeah, that's great.
I think one of the most important things too is not to assume that the traditional leader knows that that's going on in terms of a negative experience in the workplace, and that is where we all need to be looking out for each other. And if someone is bringing the negativity into the workplace, sometimes it can be as simple as listening, understanding their point of view, helping them problem solve what are the barriers to it getting better. Sometimes the biggest barrier is our own self and our attitude around it, and really just having it laid out in the open with a trusted colleague can help us now see through it or around it in a different way. And then at the end of the day, if that's not working, that there is an enablement within the workplace that you have for the team to be able to share with the right people who can help make an outcome happen, that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and that is bringing the team down.
Agreed.
Yeah, I've found very powerful lesson that venting is okay. People need to vent. It's human nature, right? But you need to be intentional when, myself, when I'm meeting with a direct report, I'll say, are we venting, or is there a real problem? Because venting is fine. But we intentionally label it and call it what it is, that I'm not going to take any action from this conversation, but you can go ahead and complain and get it off your chest, and then let's go about our day, But having that intentionality, I think, has really been powerful for me and my team.
I think that's an interesting distinction because, we need to be careful and intentional about our words and who's hearing them. But I do think that there's a level of authenticity that comes when you can share things that are hard. So that's that delicate balance as a leadership team around, we don't want to set a negative tone for the team, but we can also be authentic and saying geez, that was really hard, or this, I'm struggling with this right now, or I could use your help with this. And so it allows for some of that, letting people inside and understanding why that's hard or why it's important.
Exactly.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be set a negative tone for everything. It's not like, this project's crap, but it's like, this is really hard right now. This is what I'm struggling with. And wow, could you help me with this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important because one thing I hear leaders say, and it's a common phrase that is used too much, is that I have an open door policy. And it's like, well, I don't want to go to your door. Like, you're scary and you could fire me. And I think it's important that, especially in building that great culture, is leading by example obviously helps a lot, right? So being where those people are actually at, doing that work, engaging with them, right? So Meghan, in your title, you've got transformation as part of your title. How do you balance having transparency into the transformation work that you do versus distracting folks, right? So I always hear this from leaders where people are saying like, well, I want a seat at the table. I want my voice being heard because I heard we're going to choose this new tool or pick this new thing, and I want my voice heard. But as a leader, you might be thinking, well, if I get them involved, it distracts them from what they're actually doing, and it's no benefit for either of us. That's a hard balance that people have. How have you been able to handle that or not handle that? I don't know.
I personally index on candor. So, I've gotten feedback I'm too direct. So, I guess I like context. And so, not that I'm, not everyone likes what I like, but like I appreciate more candor, even if it's there's ambiguity in it. And I think transformations are about ambiguity. So, sharing maybe part of what we think is going to happen, to me, is let's try to practice how we are dealing and comfortable with that. And it may not manifest. It may go in a different direction. It may compound. But I think it's really important to have that kind of radical candor with kindness. So it's not like, okay, you very direct and slap people across the face. But it's important to be, I think, for everyone in a transformation to understand sort of where we're headed. Because if they don't, then why are we doing it? Or it's misbranded, or I can't paint myself into this picture. What does it mean for me? You started off with some of that. Like, I think it's really important for people to feel like what they're doing is contributing to the greater good. And if it's not, then I'm coming to work kind of lost. So for me, it's definitely share more. And you'll have to decide what inputs you take in and what you index on to make the transformation different. But I think, absolutely, at least in my most recent role that you mentioned, it's taking that feedback as much as we can and sharing as much as we can. Clarity has been clarity is most important to me. Yeah.
Zubin, I see you nodding a lot over there.
No, it's spot on. Just communicating, sharing, the more you share, the better, right? Especially around alignment. It's tough because, we live in a noisy world with lots of distractions. And it's very easy to, so one is giving context and kind of driving to kind of vision, mission, kind of key initiatives I think are always good. And also just, letting people know, like with the transformation, it is hard. It is really hard. Our likelihood of success is we may fail before we succeed. So I think also just, setting some of those expectations in terms of, though, how do you, people want to be a part of every decision. Then you have like 20 people now involved on selecting a tool, and it's like this thing's going to take 9 months, and we're still going to have half the people pissed off that the tool didn't get selected. And it's like, I'll be honest, I haven't solved that problem beyond just, less is more.
There is drag with that.
Yeah.
You let two people in. And so there is a counterbalance of, letting two people in, but then ensuring that they all kind of know where we're headed. And I think that practice of sharing and then digesting is like, that's part of the transformation, is like practicing that.
Yeah, I agree.
That's great.
And having that clarity of vision and getting that buy-in is really the key to the transformation, right? Because if the transformation at the end is like a big sneak attack, that wasn't the point. So you've got to get people involved, and you can't do that by excluding people from that. So, you can share that vision and get that buy-in along the way. And not everybody has a voting share, right? Sometimes, your role in this is to just be informed.
Yes.
But I think having that transparency is what really drives the transformation, to your point earlier, Meghan.
Meghan used two of my favorite words paired together that exist in the English language, and that is radical candor. And if you haven't read the book by Kim Scott by that name, it is it's been transformational to me as a person. I think it's a life book, not a business book. And the concept is really handy for those of us who spend a lot of time in Minnesota, where there is a Minnesota Nice approach that we use to our conversations with the people that we sometimes care about most. So then put us in the workplace, and the complexity of having real, candid conversations with other human beings becomes an even greater challenge. And the concept is that it's both. It is about challenging directly and caring deeply. And when you pair those two things together, and if you come to your workplace and you offer both to those that you work with, it's actually the most kind thing you do. It cuts through the crap the quickest, and it allows for the faster decision making and information sharing. And it is something that I think most of us, or at least I, can get always better at. But I think if more of us are practicing it, that's a pretty powerful tool.
Couldn't agree more.
I love that. So Tammylynne, how have you found success in pushing people out of their comfort zones like that in a way that is positive for them? Because again, it's scary to say, I mean, I can go and read the book and I can practice some of those things, but now I'm standing in front of my direct manager and I'm trying to propose a new idea or things like that. And how do you coach people that? No, it's okay. Like, people do want to hear your voice.
Mm-hmm. Now, you can't ask people to change their behavior or how they do things unless you lead by example, right? Mm-hmm. So you can explain to people what you're doing, but you need to model that every single minute that you're with them. You have to embody that. And there's a Lominger book called FYI, and it talks a lot about managerial courage. And so I think that's one of the pieces that we need to live by. You can tell your team to do it differently. You can tell them to storytell. You can tell them to do all these pieces. But unless you are like the paragon of what that looks like, they won't know. And so you can send them to training. You can challenge them. You can add it to their IDPs. You can do all those pieces. But unless they see you living that day in and day out, it doesn't matter.
Great.
Agreed.
How about you, Meghan? You're transforming things.
How do you have your team help hold you accountable for that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I aspire to do these things, but I ask them all the time. Keep me honest here. Challenge if you want to. If I have an answer, I'm like, hey, let me know if you disagree. If you've ever read anything about like the power distance in relationships, I think it's really important. And so letting them know that you are aspiring to do these things. Hey, I'm always trying to be transparent with you, and just reminding them of what your goals are, I think is the best way that I hold myself accountable to it. And then it opens the door for them to really call me on it when that's not the case, right? So I'm always going to try to be honest with you, and here's this and this. And if they hear me say that a lot, they can be like, I don't think you were honest when you said that. Or in full transparency, I'm not sure you meant to say that. So I think just letting them know that it's okay to challenge you on those things, and repeating it a lot. They need to hear you say it before they will believe that it's okay to call you on that, especially in a Minnesota Nice culture.
And I would add, one of the techniques I use is also ask them for advice. Like, ask my directs, what do you think we should be doing, or what do you think's wrong with this? And that level of empowerment also kind of gives them a free pass to just tell you what they think. And I find that's always refreshing. And I often get answers I necessarily don't want to hear, but they're the most valuable answers, right?
That's good. Yeah, something that I think, and Kristi, you touched on it, is understanding, and something that I talk about a lot on the show, is understanding what currencies people trade in. And Tammylynne, you talked about that in the managing up piece, right? I think it's important that if you are working with peers and managing up, those are the things that it's pretty traditional manage to manage down, right? But managing the people next to you and people up can be challenging. So learning what currencies they trade in, right, is something that's I've found success in. How about you, Meghan? Like, how do you best manage up and across yourself?
Well, I enjoy cheerleading. So for me, I don't have all the answers. And so in my role, that's kind of what I think it is as a transformation lead. Like, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not transforming myself.
Right.
It's enabling that. So it's picking up those different piece parts and sharing those stories is what I think mostly the job is helping everyone work better together. And so, not every day I show up and I'm like, rah-rah with the pom-poms out. There's days where I'm down too. But I try to most days, look at all the wonderful things that are going on and evangelize those. That's like my biggest job is to evangelize the good work and hopefully make it contagious. And I think everyone appreciates that. And now, do I see it all? No, I have to, work to see it all. But I think everyone wants recognition and deserves it. So, is that a currency? Not necessarily, but
sure.
It's something that I deliberately try to do every week.
But it's really hard to give recognition without someone else feeling like they didn't get it. Yeah. I mean, that's what I struggle with. We get, you recognize, or even a group of people, and another group of people are, especially when you have high performing orgs, because you got a lot of groups that are actually performing quite well, and it's a struggle. It's like you can never, Same thing with you promote one person and you celebrate that one person's promotion. And there's someone else who's like, and it's just.
Yep.
And some of it's like, okay, that's just life, and some of it's we can't go, praise everyone, and there's a cycle of otherwise you're giving out trophies to everyone. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's the one of the big challenges of how do you give recognition, at a fair amount to the right size without getting to a place where it's meaningless because you're giving too much of it.
Yeah.
There's a balance, right?
There's
you
a
have
balance.
to kind of struggle with.
I think everyone should have their name in lights once in a while.
Yeah.
And I'd like to challenge that a little bit because I think it's hard to say that we shouldn't recognize some people because other people will feel excluded. Because number one, we can all recognize each other. It doesn't always have to come from the leader. Number two, it's kind of like if you have kids, you can say, hey, I like your hair today.
Yes.
And the other kids don't have to feel excluded. It doesn't have to be like you're all pretty. It doesn't have to be one of those things. And I think, your authenticity as a leader comes through with that. So if you do a good job of recognizing people when it's deserved and you create an environment where people feel like they can recognize each other, I think, you set the pace in terms of setting that expectation that we should recognize and reward good work. And, to your point, if somebody's like, hey, and we forgot about the infrastructure team. Hey, you're right, I'm sorry about that. But also, yes, it's okay to not recognize every single person all the time. Right. Because to your point earlier, that's what makes it feel authentic.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's tough. The offensive lineman never gets recognized for not, for protecting the quarterback for the most time in a football game. And I think there's teams and there's individuals who are, the introverts that do a lot of great, and I think part of leader's job is to bring that to the spotlight. But it's hard. And my whole point is we do it and we should do it. And it's hard, I think, going back to why we did our, WOW channel was let people, recognize other people, but there's still, it's a big challenge, right? And,
You mentioned value, right, and connecting our work to the value it's creating. And I think if we can focus on that and the why we're recognizing someone versus just the kind of attaboy, but really connecting it to the business outcomes, it's hard then to not find a way to recognize everybody's contributions. We may have to look harder for those that are more quiet and more kind of on the infrastructure side of the operation, whatever that is for each of our organizations. And yet, if everyone's paying attention to it, and it is a value of the organization, I think that's maybe the other point is, if culturally, and I define culture in a very simple way these days, and it is how we do things around here, really. And if how we really do things around here is that we celebrate individual successes, then we're going to find ways to determine how everybody's contributing to the business value. And we're also going to be more in tune to who's not, which allows us to manage the poor performance more quickly. And managing poor performance, the ideal outcome is that they get clarity around what they're not doing or what they should be doing more of or differently, and now they become a high performer. Or another outcome is it's time for them to depart. And either one can be just fine, but without that clarity and how they're contributing to the business value or not, which could be the how they're doing their work, right? Back to the attitude. Yep. Sometimes the thing that's wrong is the how. And that should be something that we can tangibly attach to as well and communicate to someone that's just as important as the technical expertise. Their how matters an awful lot.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more with that. Yep. There's a gratitude element too. I mean, while I think it's important for it to connect to value, sometimes even if it's light on value, like just being thankful, since it's next week, being thankful for people to contribute in whatever way they're contributing is important, and we should take time to give that gratitude to our teams and make them feel engaged, and whatever spectrum the value and the contribution is.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, a lot of folks in this room, a big part of their job is to find problems. Mm-hmm. And if that's your day job, day in and day out, everything starts to look like or an opportunity. Yeah. Maybe, right? But finding that balance, I think, is really important to add, to remember to have gratitude, right? Mm-hmm. To remember that the opportunity that you have in front of you is something important, right? You can make some good work with it. The other thing I want to talk about, specifically to the theme of this show, is that purpose-led organization, many, many years ago is more about what companies produce. Now it's more about why they actually produce it, right? And those are some of the more successful companies in the world now that have surpassed a lot of organizations because they have a big focus on the why do they exist, right? But the idea of what I see a lot of people saying, well, my company does not have a purpose statement, right? And or it's not clear to me what that purpose is. What is the dent in the universe we're trying to make here at our organization, right? But what I always coach people on is don't wait for your organization to come up with that purpose statement. You can do that with your team. You don't need permission to do that, right? Yep. What are your thoughts on that, Kristi?
I agree wholeheartedly. I think finding your place in an organization, big or small, and how your contributions matter to that organization, there's something empowering about actually the responsibility of finding that for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when it aligns with spoken or unspoken, documented or not, the purpose of the organization, when you find that kind of fit, it's like your superpower. And I don't think it has to be written down. I think you can feel it if you're paying attention to it and you're really serious about how you're going to contribute. And if you're not feeling that way about your job or your organization, I would challenge you to take ownership for that as well. And maybe it's time for something different, or maybe it's time to challenge your team and your leadership about why, and be honest about that. But I think we each have a responsibility. And I've been at one company for an awful long time, longer than I'd ever like to say. And I've had to create and recreate that for myself many times. And I don't consider that my company's responsibility. I consider that my own.
I agree. I mean, my kids ask me, what do I do? And, it's hard in technology to sort of articulate to your 10-year-old what you do. But at the heart of what I do is I help technology teams, technologists, work better together and with other constituents in the company. Mm-hmm. And I don't use the word constituents, with other people in the company to my 10-year-old. And that is my purpose. And it's simple and they get it. And so I think if you can explain it to your kid or to your niece, nephew, neighbor, then it's it's real. And I mean, if you can't find that, talk to me afterwards at the happy hour. We can talk about it together. You can explain to me what you do. But I think it's a simple thing. Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate to work for a company that has a really solid purpose. But within my team, most of them right here, I think we have a pretty darn good purpose, a really fulfilling one.
Mm-hmm. I think the notion of finding that purpose can come from a lot of different ways. And it can be about the products or services that you create. It can be the purpose that you have to your shareholders, to your consumers. It can be to your peers, to your colleagues, to the team that reports to you. I think, we're all intrinsically driven by different things. But if you cannot find the purpose of what you're doing, I would agree with you. It's not necessarily your company's responsibility to find that. I think you need to find that within yourself, and what you find personally fulfilling, and matching that. It's not necessarily driven by a pamphlet or a mission statement or something that you see printed at your corporate office. That's something that drives you internally.
I love that answer. So let's talk about empowerment. It's something that in the last number of years has become a huge, almost a buzzword to the point. The problem I have with it is that people are already plenty powerful. But how do you as leaders create that space for them? Because that's what I feel like empowerment truly is about providing the space, not necessarily improving them. I don't know how else to put that, but...
Yeah, I see myself as like an enabling leader.
Yeah.
I don't have all the ideas or all the answers, but the empowerment comes in people being able to bring those ideas to someone like me, and me helping knock down the impediments for those things to actually surface higher than myself. So the empowerment, it's probably measured on what those ideas are, but it's really about enabling the organization, the team, the individuals to bring forward those great ideas and have them take hold and get somewhere.
Yeah.
I think to extend on that, it's not enough to tell your team, you're empowered, do it.
Yes.
As leaders, we have responsibilities to provide them the tools, the vision, to remove obstacles. We have responsibilities within that. And by telling them that is our role, to provide air cover, to set direction, to remove obstacles, to provide escalation when you need it, that's what empowers them. It's not the message of you can do it. I believe in you. I think you demonstrate that by showing these are all the things that I'm doing. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm taking things out of your way and letting you do it from there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think if you grew up in a culture where it was more hierarchical, and or even I was talking with some of our panelists before about even from the time we enter kindergarten and get through the school system, everything is about hierarchy and following the rules and listening to what our the powers that be say, whatever roles they're in. And so there's a lot to unpack by the time you get to an employer situation, right? Being an employee for those who grew up in a traditional school environment. So you think about the years that we've learned how to operate within a hierarchical structure. And so then when we have this buzzword of empowerment, what can happen and what I've seen happen is leadership say, okay, I hear what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to empower others. And actually what ends up happening in certain circumstances, and I'm learning from, is it doesn't mean that you abandon people. And so, Tammylynne, to your point, very important that we as leaders are setting the vision and providing boundaries, wide boundaries within which people can work and understand what the success metrics look like and have those appropriate stage gates along the way so that we're communicating and we can continue to guide and support and eliminate barriers as was described. But it is one thing it is absolutely not is abandonment. And I think if folks have grown up in that more traditional hierarchy, it can sometimes feel like they've been abandoned. And that certainly isn't the goal of the leaders that I'm aware of. But I would say that we are still practicing how to give that empowerment and find that right balance along the way.
Yeah, I think it's I agree with the panelists. It's, setting those clear goals, challenging them with problems to go solve, and then giving them freedom to go figure out how to solve it with some level of coaching along the way to support them. And I think that last piece, which is you can let them fail a little bit, and sometimes a lot, but also coaching and challenging, right, as well. And I think it's very easy to just say, okay, you're empowered, go do this, and let me know when you're done. But there's check-ins that can happen too, and I think there's a balance you got to find to do that. So I'm not, I personally like to challenge people, and more so challenge. I think in general people can do more than they believe they can do. In general, most people can do more than they believe they can do. So I like to push people. I like to give them more responsibility than they're actually ready for or want. And 80% of the time they rise to the occasion and crush it. So to me, that's a form of empowerment, is just, I believe in you. You can do this.
That's great. Yeah, the idea, and especially in the transformation and people are going through in Agile and these other things, is this whole idea that I keep hearing people talk about, which is fail fast. And the problem is like, nobody wants to fail. Like nobody wants to screw it up, right? So why do we talk about fail fast? And how do we, Meghan, how do you reward failure? Like that's a really difficult for an organization, isn't it? To say like you were saying, Zubin, like go and try this thing, and if it doesn't work, cool. But like I'm going to have a lot of excuses later. That's why these people were in my way, and that's why it failed. Not my fault.
It's tough. I mean, when you've got shareholders to answer to, and it's not innate in us to just award failure. Now, we learn the most from failure.
Yep.
So, that's a constant problem to continue to work on. And I would say, varies by team and by leader how that's awarded or not. I think holding up examples to our points earlier around gratitude and recognition. I think it's Etsy. The story about Etsy and the 3-arm sweater. Have you guys ever heard this? So it's something about, they passed around this 3-armed knitted sweater at Etsy, and it was because some way along the way a developer screwed up something pretty big on Etsy, and Etsy's a crafting site to sell stuff, and so this 3-armed sweater came to be, and it's like it's an award, it's recognition, like, hey, you screwed it up, you owned up to it, you fixed it. Here's the 3-armed sweater, and they pass it around. And I'm like, that's a great way to just recognize the failures that happen, because we all make them, and just hold it up as something to be recognized and for everyone to learn from. Not in an insulting way, but in a way to say this is going to move us forward.
And I think, Meghan, it also depends on where your culture's at. In some cultures, they can really embrace that and they can talk about failing fast. For cultures that are a little bit more risk averse, it's not about failing fast, it's about rewarding bravery, right? So
Yes.
hey, thank you for trying that. Thank you for saying that. Rewarding those behaviors that will eventually drive that risk aversion out of the conversation. But it's not just about, it doesn't have to be an epic failure. It's about rewarding bravery.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like to think of it as winning fast, right? So go for quick wins, and if you fail along the way, you learn and you adjust. And really, a quick win is the opposite. It's kind of the same as failing fast, because your goal is to fail fast, but you typically will. Your goal is to win fast or get quick wins, and you typically will have errors along the way. And it's a mindset, right? It's not literally fail fast.
I like that reframe.
It's a mindset. But I think reframing it definitely gets us around, and executives they can deal with that. Board members can deal with, we're going for quick wins, or we're going to go try to get something out, and we're going to learn along the way. Those lessons are failures in the definition of failing fast, but it's not the end state of failure. It's, the means to learning how to win.
No, I love that. I think mindset is extremely important, especially in these organizations that are changing and transforming very quickly. It can come down to nomenclature. Just it can be that simple. And I love what you were saying, Zubin, about let's not talk about failing, let's talk about winning. And obviously, failure will happen in that, right? But we're chasing wins. We're chasing opportunities, not problems, right?
Because I think fundamentally organizations are slow.
Yeah.
Very slow.
Yep.
Slow. And if you get quick wins, then you get people to get out of the let's have 10 discussions about this and let's get to what does a quick win look like and how fast can we get there, and be okay with the errors and mistakes that happen. Right? That's hard to do. Easy to say.
And that notion of what a win is, I think reframing that faster is better than perfect.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Is it fast? Is it perfect? It doesn't have to be both.
I agree. Yeah. People talk about there's 2 different ways to do things. It doesn't matter. It's just start it, pick one and go, and you'll get 90% of the result either way. And you will spending 2 months trying to figure out whether it's A or B doesn't actually matter. It's all about execution. Personally, I think it's about execution and the adaptation along that path of execution, whether you go down path A or path B.
I think the adaptability is one of the major keys, right? What did you do with what happened? Yeah. And if what you did is you shared with others so that the same mistake, if it's a mistake, or the same outcome of failure doesn't happen exactly the same way twice. So sharing forward, educating others about what you learned, and then pivoting, and that adaptability and that resiliency to, well, that was not what I was thinking, but it was perhaps reframing it in terms of an experiment. We now know the outcome, and now here's what we're going to do next. And I think at least, you mentioned, Kurt, the nomenclature. I think that can matter a whole lot in terms of kind of lifting people up and focusing on the future instead of dwelling in that one particular outcome.
Yeah. That's great. Kind of as we round out towards the finish line here, I wanted to talk a little bit about mentorship. And so, I truly believe that, really good leaders are usually taught by really good leaders, but also that you learn a lot from really bad leaders too, sometimes even more. But as people say, your mentors choose you. You don't get to choose your mentors typically, right? What have you found in what do you look for when you're looking for someone to mentor? If you're talking with someone specifically, regardless of, obviously, if you're kind of, just happen to be the chief human resources officer, you're kind of mentoring everybody all at once. But how do you personally choose your people you want to mentor? What do you look for?
I can start, since that seemed to be a little focused on HR. I think, well, we all play a role, right? So all the panelists will have great answers to this. I think back to where I started around curiosity being really important. Positive attitude, although at any point in time we all don't come to work with that each and every day, and that's fine too. But generally a positive attitude and kind of an abundance mentality that we can all win. And if someone believes that we can all win and they're curious and they don't think that they have it all figured out, because none of us do, including the top leader of every organization. Everybody is in this to be their best selves every day, and that is reimagining ourselves each and every day and learning. And so with those kind of key principles, I find opportunities each and every day to consider someone else to be a part of a relationship with me. And if only there were more hours in the day.
Right.
It's one of the most fun parts of the job.
Meghan?
So, I really enjoy that kind of curiosity and dialogue. Selfishly, I know this is taken the wrong way, I like the reverse mentor too. So the things that they can bring to observe, that they observe and bring to me about the organization or the team or things that I could do better, I also really appreciate. So, do I look for that and only I deny people mentoring if they aren't going to help me too? But no. But I do appreciate getting their inputs on how things are going or how I could help improve myself,
right.
as well as street. Yes. There's so much that goes. In fact, in almost every mentoring relationship that I've had, I get I not almost every single one. I get more from it than likely the other party does.
I think the notion of mentorship is such a big term, and it's really the question around how do you select the people that you're going to invest in. And the people that I choose to invest time in are people that have an enthusiasm, like an unabashed enthusiasm for the work that we're doing. And even if it's something that doesn't seem like it's part of their job or it doesn't seem like it's something that sounds really interesting, they bring an enthusiasm to it that makes you want to go back there and bring them other stuff, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to bring an additional piece of work to somebody who's going to be like, okay, yeah, I could do that. They want to be like, yeah, I'd be happy to help with that. And they bring an enthusiasm to it. You know that they're going to do a great job with it because they have a vested interest in making it successful. And I'm sure we all can think of people that have built a career on just being that person that people want to be around. And they've made tremendous inroads and relationships, inside and outside the organization just by being the type of person that people want to invest time in. And so I think naturally you gravitate towards people that actually feel like if you offer feedback or if you offer coaching, they're happy you did that, as opposed to like, please stop talking to me. Please don't come to my desk anymore.
I couldn't agree more. I get so much energy from that. Like, I don't. It sounds like you do too.
Yeah.
But that interaction and just their passion like feeds my own passion to do more. So I couldn't agree. Oh, it's good.
How about you, Zubin? I did some research, and your team told me that Fireball whiskey would get them.
That's what Ann told you to quote. Okay, I knew it. I mean, it's hard. I never really had a formal mentor kind of through my career. I just had a really good boss who whipped me into shape and kind of showed me the ropes. So to me, and I don't really have formal mentees per se. I just have, I see people with potential that aren't using it. And that frustrates me, and I want to fix that. And so my nature is like, let's try to fix that. And it is very, so there's some of I'm sometimes just seeing like, look, you can be doing so much more, and let's talk about how I can, challenge you. It kind of goes back to I like to challenge people. And I like to see people really kind of use their full potential. To me, like, the biggest, the most saddest thing is someone who has so much potential in the world, but just they aren't able to seize it or use it, or they're not given that opportunity. I don't believe they actually are that capable. So looking for those, and sometimes those are the quiet people that are tucked away in the corner that just need that chance and need that push. And so part of it is that, and then also, I think also some of the same, there are the proactive, enthusiastic, that are the folks that are like really, really, and they're going to do great things. And it's obviously very natural, and you learn so much feeding off that, and it actually gives me a lot of energy as well, doing that. But I do try to also worry about the people that aren't asking for it, because it's usually people that aren't asking for it that really need it.
That's a good point. The wallflowers need it.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, you got to pay attention, right? Like you got to.
Yeah.
You can't, just because they're not saying anything doesn't mean they have nothing to say, right?
Yeah.
You've got to create those multiple inroads and channels to get that feedback or that communication from folks. It can't just be like I said before, I have an open door policy. Why isn't nobody showing up in my door?
Yeah.
Well, because you have a big scary title.
Yeah.
You can fire me. I don't want to go to your door. Because it goes to, something. I feel like there's two types of people. There's people who have a coach, and there's people who don't know they need a coach. There's I feel like in order for us to, especially as we're going through this time of change, a lot of people's jobs are changing. We're changing titles in technology every couple of years. We're calling it, this transformation piece. I'm talking with CEOs that are asking me, how long does this transformation take? It's like, no, it doesn't stop. You're forever transforming now. It's always going to be change. So we live in this constant state of change, right? So, and the problem is that sometimes once you identify a problem and you actually fix the problem has changed by that point because of how fast things are moving. So my final question to everybody here is in that constant state of churn and change, like, what are the most important factors to keeping a strong culture, to keeping your team on task, to making sure that they understand that just because we might not be working on the same things 6 months from now that we were told, that it's okay, right? How do you keep people engaged, and what have you seen success with? Tammylynne?
No, it's a good question. I think as your mission changes with things, it's hard to keep people tied to that vision, right? Because you're going to take the hill on this thing. And if that thing changes, do you get them excited about that new thing? I think if you tie it back to your consumers, or if you tie those intermediate goals to something larger that is fixed, I think it helps to resonate with that. And I think also personalizing how you personally accept those types of changes, right? Like, yes, we were doing this, and now we're doing this. And for me, I get what you're saying, but also I got a lot of things to do, right? So I know that endpoint has changed for us a little bit, and, it might take some time for us to get used to that. But in the meantime, I got a ton of stuff to do. So, accepting and acknowledging that those intermediate goals might have changed, and it's hard for all of us. But in the meantime, we still have a lot of things to do, and we may not know the perfect picture of what's going to happen over the next 12, 18, 24 months, but it doesn't change the fact that we got a lot of things to do.
That's great.
I would add that because things are changing so much and they will continue only to accelerate, that we continue to have the conversations we need to have regularly to reprioritize and connect what we're doing with why we're doing it. And if that's stable enough, that can be that can help folks orient toward it. And if it's not stable because something's changed, and many organizations go through so many different changes that you can't begin to articulate them all. But if you keep orienting back to that why, and if the why changes month to month, then articulate it again and reprioritize again. I think that's one of the most important things we can do. And then I think for everybody, it's put on your own oxygen mask first. It's really hard to help other people if you haven't been sustaining your own self. And sometimes we forget about that, and that's great that we're generous individuals and that we want to help others be successful in the workplace. It really starts with making sure we're caring for ourselves and making sure we're prepared to head into the workplace each and every day and lead through the challenges of transformation.
Those are both really good points. I would say additionally, just as we continually evolve, it's also saying no sometimes. Like, I'm not saying everyone should say no, but focus usually gets us to a place faster. And so there's times, and to that empowerment thing we talked about, to be okay saying, this and all the other things, we need to understand the priority. We need to get some more clarity on how these things all fit together because it's too much. And being okay sharing that with your leaders or helping your teams navigate through, there's sometimes too much that's being asked and can't do it all.
Yeah, we have a saying at C Prime, which is the only thing constant is change at C Prime, and that's something that started like 9 years ago. People started saying that, and it's just because we constantly tinker with how we organize, how we deliver, what we deliver. And the fact is, we all live in a 24/7 globalized world. The world is changing. It will always be changing at a much faster pace than it ever has. That is the new world order. It will never go back to what it used to be. So get used to it. Wire that into everything. So every time I'm talking, every type of communication, change. And by the way, change is the hardest thing to do. It is against our human natures to change. We are habitual creatures. We love to do the same thing every day. And change is so hard. And the people that actually have the hardest time changing are Agile coaches. For those of you out there, they are the worst.
Really?
As someone who manages and looks after a lot of Agile coaches, and can tell you this, it's hard.
Yeah.
So accept it, acknowledge it, put it out there on the table. Like, this is just hard. We're all going to struggle with this. Let's struggle with it together.
Right.
Let's accept that we have to keep changing, keep evolving to improve and survive and thrive. And if you can wire that into the org, that it's part of your organizational muscle, and truly what will sustain your organization or C Prime will be our ability to change and respond to the market. And that's every part of our business can and will change. So let's just stop trying to keep things the way they were, because that's not necessarily the right answer. I'm not saying you change everything all at once, but you have to just be open-minded. And I think it's hard, right? Even you think about opinions and politics and the world we live in now, and it's like people are becoming more and more polarized, less willing to even talk about, views that we can form and change opinions, or we can swing from side to side. We're like locking ourselves down, which is very anti-change.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I know I learned a lot, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to come down and share with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Kurt.
Thank you for listening to The Schmidt List. If you want to learn more about how Foundry accelerates innovation, check out foundrymakes.com. And if you'd like me to speak about establishing a growth mindset at your conference or with your team, drop me a note at kurt@foundrymakes.com. Oh, and the next time you're on the internet, head to iTunes and leave the show a review. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I hope you have a fantastic week.